Who dat? Welcome to the podcast you've been waiting for. Great perspective and exclusive interviews.
It's a hard job for those guys because it's happening fast.
The kind of Saints insight and fun commentary you won't get anywhere else.
We've got plenty of technology to speed things up.
It's time to kick off your Been There, Done That Saints podcast, where we hand it off to our host, Mike Neighbors, and Super Bowl winning linebacker, Scott Shanley.
Proud of these guys.
It's a special edition of your Been There, Done That podcast. Welcome in, everybody. We're going to focus in on special teams. Now, a few weeks ago, we had punter Thomas Morstead. This time around, it's going to be kicker Wil Lutz. Now, Lutz is coming off a great season. I felt like he should have been a Pro Bowler, but we're going to talk to him about a number of subjects. And one that really intrigued me was his great tryout with the New Orleans Saints, because Sean Payton raved about that when it happened. But first, let me bring in our voice of reason, our producer, Justin Thomas. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. And my partner, Scott Shanley. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good.
All right, Shanley. I mentioned Payton. You know, he doesn't let us behind the curtain too much. We're going to have Wil Lutz on in just a second. You know, they cut two veterans in that training camp. I think it was Kai Forbath and Dustin Hopkins. And then they bring in this guy, Wil Lutz, and Payton comes out and he says, this guy just gave us the best kicking tryout I've ever seen. I mean, to me, that was a young guy just out of Georgia State. I was surprised Payton did that, but once in a while he'll do that in front of the media. He'll be honest. I mean, he's always, has different degrees of honesty, but I think that was something that I was surprised that he let us all know about at the time.
Yeah, a couple of things about that statement is you talk about putting pressure on a kid. I mean, when you make a statement like that, people are automatically expecting big things out of the kicker. And secondly, that type of praise coming from Coach Payton, who is a Bill Parcells disciple, and Bill Parcells hated kickers, which I think Coach Payton has a little bit of Parcells in him. I think when I heard him say that, I thought this tryout must have been like something out of this world, like nothing people have ever seen before. And I would say after seeing Wil Lutz kick for a couple of years, he was absolutely right in his assessment and what he saw, because Wil should have been a Pro Bowler. I think he was the best kicker in the NFL last year. And there's a lot to be said when your kicker runs out there and everyone feels very confident that he's going to make it, and that's Wil Lutz. Yeah,
he broke Morten Andersen's franchise record for consecutive made field goals. That's pretty good cotton there with the best kicker in NFL history, arguably, with Morten Andersen. You know, Wil Lutz struggled a little bit early in his career, and I think it shows how strong he is mentally, that despite all the fanfare with Payton praising him, that he bounced back. I want to ask your perspective, because this is what this podcast is all about, the great stories that you tell from the Sean Payton years. And you're a defensive player, though, and there's kind of that stereotype with kickers. You mentioned Bill Parcells. Honestly, Scott Shanley, and you were honest a couple of weeks ago about how you felt about minicamp, and you didn't feel like being there, and the veterans don't feel like being there, and we kind of knew that, but you couldn't tell us that when I interviewed you as a player. But how did players feel who are sweating it out each and every day, even back in two-a-days? Then you have minicamp where you guys have some physical practices, and the kickers are off to the side. It's not their fault, but they're not in the heart of it like you guys. Do you hold it against them? Is there a different pecking order? I mean, how is it in the locker room when you have special teams guys and then guys that are just going at it every day?
Oh, absolutely. We hold it against them. And I don't want to use the word hate them because I don't. There's a lot of great guys and we're friends with everybody in the locker room, but we resent them immensely. I mean, when we're sitting there sweating, dehydrated, guys getting IVs, and they're over there jumping around, tackling each other on the dummies that we have to use to tackle and hit. There's a lot of resentment there. Now, if those guys do their job and they kick great in the game, make field goals to help us win games, we'll let it go. We know they're just specialists. We don't really consider them football players. But when those guys are jacking around in practice and they start missing field goals, it doesn't work well in the locker room, I'll tell you that.
Wil Lutz and Thomas Morstead are so good, it kind of falls into the one category you just described. But yeah, that has to be awkward if you're struggling. And I'm sure there's different levels of it too, as we're going to get to Wil Lutz in our interview we did actually right inside the Saints locker room, which was a good access for us during minicamp. But I want to talk to you about, you may have a veteran who's struggling, and then you may have a young guy who's struggling. Do you give more of a hall pass to the veteran because he's proven himself, or is it just it's just tough all around?
No, you definitely give the veteran veteran guy a little bit more of a pass because he's a veteran for a reason. He's made big kicks in the NFL, and he's gotten to that point. Young guys, when you bring young guys aboard and they start missing kicks, everybody's in the locker room saying, hey, who's out there on the waiver wire? There's tons of kickers at home practicing right now. We got to get somebody else in here. I mean, they got a short leash everywhere in the organization.
Wow. I feel for those guys. All right, before we get to Wil Lutz, to me, Thomas Morstead has been around for so long, though. We talk about his relationship with Wil Lutz coming up in the interview. But, I really feel like, when you have that kind of relationship, a football team is so fortunate. It's so rare to see that in the NFL, Scott. Usually maybe you have a good punter, maybe you have a good kicker, but the Saints, part of the reason I think they're big favorites year in and year out is because even look at the NFC South, the Bucs haven't found a kicker in years. Carolina's kind of gone through ups and downs as, Atlanta had Matt Bryant, but they just got rid of him. But I think that's a big key to the Saints' success, the continuity in the kicking game.
Without a doubt, it takes all three phases, and I know people love to talk about offense first and foremost. Then they'll talk about defense. Are you taking the ball away? But you truly need all three phases. And a special teams, if you don't have a good special teams unit and a good kicker and a good punter, you will lose a handful of games in the NFL. And losing a handful of games may knock you out of the playoffs. It may knock you into the 4th or 5th seed where you don't have home field advantage. So the teams with just thinking back to the teams who win the Super Bowl who are consistently good every year. They have established kickers, and they're not new faces every year at that position.
All right, without further delay, we get into this week's guest. We stay with the special teams. He is a Georgia native, went to Georgia State, but ever since he burst on the scene in New Orleans, he has been money for the New Orleans Saints. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome in the starting kicker for the Saints, Wil Lutz. Wil, appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's just talk about, the thing I want to get to before your success here is I remember Coach Payton, had 2 veterans in camp, and then all of a sudden, this guy named Wil Lutz had this great tryout, and then you become the starting kicker, and he comes out in front of the media and says, he had a great tryout. I mean, for a lot of kickers, that would have been a lot of pressure. It seems like you embraced the moment at that point.
Well, I was very fortunate to have Coach stick his neck out for me like that. I mean, I did have a great workout, but it's hard to live up to words like that, but, when he sticks his neck out like that, fortunately he gave me a longer leash because of, the things he said. And, that came with a lot of bumps in the road. My rookie year wasn't as smooth as it could have been. And, I'm very grateful that he stuck with me through all the bumps. And, I'm grateful for this opportunity. It's been amazing.
We've always heard about this tryout. Take me back to that tryout. What was your mindset? And was, how was that atmosphere for you?
Yeah, I remember like it was yesterday. They brought me in here and they had me go warm up while the team was still out there. So I'm like walking out there in a t-shirt that's way too big on me, shorts that don't fit me right. And coach comes over here and I just say, hey, thanks. And he's just like, all right, we'll watch you. And I went out there and I kicked, and I remember he stopped me in between kicks. And I mean, I literally had me shaking in my cleats. It was a different feeling, something I had never felt, but it obviously prepared me for, the first game. I'm asked to kick a 61-yard game winner, and, it didn't faze me. Unfortunately, I missed it, but I think just like little instances like that where, I'm so wide-eyed just to meet Coach Payton prepared me for those situations.
And Coach Payton keeps things close to the vest. He doesn't really reveal things like tryouts or behind the scenes. For him to say something shows how good your tryout was, but what was his reaction afterwards? Did you have a good feel that maybe I have a chance to make this team?
No, I was very naive. I really had no idea what was going on. The whole world was kind of shocked by it, by the situation. But I specifically remember going up to him and saying, "Hey, thanks for having me out." And he's like, "You're not leaving." I was like, "Oh, okay." And I think they had signed me to the practice squad while they figured out what they wanted to do. But I just remember him saying that. And once he told me that, I kind of realized like, wow, this is kind of getting real. And I woke up. I went home, took a nap, and I woke up to my agent blowing me up like, hey, they just cut the kicker. And it was a pretty wild 24 hours.
Let's fast forward to this offseason. I mean, you've really established yourself here in New Orleans, but every time I talk to you, I know you always have the mindset that I'm not content. I always want to get better. How are you approaching this offseason after such a great season you had a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how it works in this position is you only have one on a roster, so you're competing with everybody else around the NFL and everybody trying to get into the NFL. And, regardless of the contract situation now, it's, that's only as good as, what it's worth, right? So I treat every day like a new day. I compete with myself, compete with, even me and Morstead try to make as much competitions as we can because, you have to stay like that. You have to be ready. And I think that's what makes, the best product on the field.
I mentioned Georgia State, and the life of a kicker. A lot of guys don't get drafted. I mean, that's the majority of you. You really don't know when you're going to get that chance. I know. I talked to a lot of guys. You'll see each other in airports because you have similar tryouts. Coming out of college, what was your mindset about playing in the NFL?
Well, I started studying for law school already.
Really?
Because I really didn't think it was too foreseeable, unfortunately. But I'm very fortunate that the Ravens had a staff that was very familiar with kickers specifically, with the special teams tenure they have there with Coach Rosberg, Randy Brown, and their head coach.
We're not live.
Harbaugh, yeah. And, they've been around the game for a long time, so they know the position really well, and they saw the potential I had. And, when you're able to go up to compete with clearly one of the best kickers in the league, and Justin Tucker, that's an opportunity I couldn't turn down, and here we are now.
I don't want to skim over it. Law school, huh? What motivated you to do that potentially?
Well, that was the plans. I wasn't completely set on it, but I was a political science and criminal justice major in college, and I wanted to get into corporate law, and so that was going to be the route I tried to take. The NFL didn't work out, and fortunately it worked out.
You think you'll ever revisit that? I mean, you guys have an off season. Would you do that after your playing career's over potentially?
Yeah, at some point I would like to go back to school. I'm not positive it'd be in law, but the plan is one of these off seasons to go back get a degree.
All right, Justin, you know what time it is. We're not going to let Wil Lutz go before he ventures into this. All right, more likely 3 hypotheticals with Wil Lutz. You don't know what's coming, do you?
I have no idea.
And I love it. We're in the middle of your locker room and everybody's staring at us. We're just going to take this on head-to-head, aren't we?
Let's go. Here we go.
When was the point? Was there a turning point? Was there one kick more likely where you felt like, you know what? I have a place in this league. I'm going to stick around.
That's tough. There was a game my rookie year with 4-for-4 against Seattle. I think we won the game by 3. And I look back after that game. I was kind of like, man, I belong to be. I need to be here. And then the other one would be the Carolina game winner my rookie year. It's 52-yarder. It kind of hit me hard. I was like, this is where I need to be.
All right, more likely number 2. You mentioned Thomas Morstead. We had him on earlier in our podcast, and he has a ton of respect for you. He loves the relationship you guys have, but he wants one shot to kick a field goal. He says he's pretty good in practice. More likely, will that ever happen? Maybe you guys are up by 21 points. Can Morstead do it? You have faith in him.
Hey, I told you we compete at everything. So if he wants a field goal, I want a punt. But I'll let Coach Payton handle that, and we'll just keep doing what we do.
You're doing good. Final, more likely. You grew up, obviously. I don't know if you were a big football fan growing up, but more likely, was there a kicker that you kind of looked up to, patterned your game after, and you said, you know what, I'm going to be that guy?
Yeah, out of Vinatieri, no doubt.
Oh, really?
As I got older and towards college, it was Justin Tucker because he kind of came onto the scene my sophomore year in college, and he was, the next great thing. But Adam Vinatieri's been doing it for so long and at such a high level. Ever since I started kicking a soccer ball, I was watching Vinatieri. So, yeah, Vinatieri.
You nailed it. After the music died down, like the mood kind of died down here. They didn't pay as much attention to us, did they?
Yeah, the music got a little awkward, but I think we're good now.
Before I let you go, I just want to ask you this. Growing up, were you a soccer player? Did you think you played in the NFL? Was there that moment where you thought, you know what, this is what I want to do is kick?
I wanted to be in the MLS growing up. I played soccer from 3 to 18, and it was my brother got asked to be the kicker for the football team, and I was the annoying little brother that wanted to be better than him. So I joined the team my junior year in high school, and I was like, this is what I want to do because I was lazy and didn't want to run anymore. So I started kicking.
All right, well, listen, I know it gets busy during minicamp. You got a lot of responsibilities, a lot of meetings. We really appreciate your time. Hope to have you back on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We appreciate Wil Lutz's spare time. Boy, we were right in the heart of the locker room. And Shanley, first of all, when they played the more likely theme, it was on my laptop. So the whole locker room pretty much was in suspense looking at us. It was almost like looking at Wil Lutz like he was a bad kicker, as we mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, but kind of some awkward moments there. But Wil Lutz, just like he has done really almost since he stepped foot in New Orleans, he delivered 26 straight field goals last year, breaking Morten Andersen's 25 straight. Big things ahead for Wil Lutz. When I sat down with him, though, Scott, he's from the Atlanta area. I said, "Did you grow up a Falcons fan?" And he looked at me like, "I'm not going to answer that question. I plead the fifth." So I think off the bat, I kind of put him in an awkward spot.
Oh, I don't know if I like that. I wish you would have just said no instead of pleading the fifth.
I know.
I'm gonna have to look at Will different now. I don't look at him different. I mean, hey, Atlanta needs their 10 fans. He happened to be one of the 10 fans they have. I can't really blame him.
Anytime I could put a Falcons question on a tee for Shanley, I will take full advantage of that. Well, listen, I think the future is bright with Wil Lutz, with Thomas Morstead, with the Saints team. Before we go, I want to ask you this, Scott. This time of year, we're in July now. How is it for we talked about the offseason once the season is over, but with training camp on the horizon, I'm sure you're just trying to get away from football, spend as much time with your family. Take us through the process of what's going through your mind this time of year.
Well, yeah, this time of year, you've just went through OTAs, you went through minicamp, and now you're going to get a period of time a lot of guys will leave town, go visit family, take kids to see their grandparents. But it's also hard because it's your last chance to get away from the game, but you can't get too far away from the game. All the work you put in, you're building up to have a great training camp. So wherever you go, you're working out, you're staying in shape, you're running, you're thinking about football. And it's an interesting dynamic, but one I always liked because I got to go home, see the family, but I also made sure I had a place to continue to train and build up for training camp.
And good insight right there. Well, listen, we'll be with you, obviously, right up till training camp and with you the entire season. We're here for you, Saints fans, each and every week. If you want to check us out, we're on all the platforms: iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, Google, and Stitcher. Justin Thomas, any parting statements here? Anything else on your mind?
No, not really.
No, you're good? You're content?
I am content.
Okay, as long as you're content, I feel good. All right, for Justin Thomas, for Scott Shanley, this has been another edition of your Been There, Done That podcast. We'll talk to you again next week.